Hey guys, it's Abel here with the Sustainable Self-Development Podcast, and in this episode you'll hear part 1 of my conversation with the one and only Dr. Mike Israetel. I had him on previously some months ago and had one of my favorite episodes with him, and that time we talked mainly about training and how you should periodize your training, why deloads are important, and how to manage your connective tissue health besides getting as jacked as possible. It's been one of my most popular podcast episodes to date, and I felt really compelled to reach out to him again to now talk about his new book that he co-authored on the topic of healthy eating. Because health is really a concept that way too many people feel qualified to preach all kinds of messages about, and it leads to the promotion of all kinds of false ideas and scams. So in this episode, we'll really geek out on everything related to healthy eating, including calorie balance and the importance of maintaining a healthy body weight and body fat percentage, why eating mostly healthy whole foods is important, and why you can be perfectly healthy eating a whole variety of macronutrient profiles. We actually ended up spending a fair bit of time talking about how people can actually decide who to trust and follow in this whole space, and how to detect all the BS that is out there. I love this interview because this is about a super interesting topic, and also because Dr. Mike is always an absolute pleasure to talk to. He's always on point, articulate, has great humor, and he comes up with these super cool analogies on the fly, which amazes me because I suck at coming up with appropriate analogies usually. I actually planned asking him about how he comes up with these analogies, but forgot, unfortunately. But anyway, next time. So I hope you enjoy this part 1 of the interview. I'll be posting part 2 in a few days. Use the timestamps to navigate between all the topics in this interview, and let's hear the interview. Thank you so much, Dr. Mike, for taking the time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so first of all, just before we dive into our topic today, which is your new book, Understanding Healthy Eating, just a kind of random question. How was your year professionally? I've seen a lot of podcasts that you appeared on. I know your team, Renessance Periodization, has produced a lot of cool products. So has it been a really cool year for you professionally?
Best year ever.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a very good year. Um, as an aside, I think it's interesting when people say, oh, 2016 was bad or 2016 was good. I think we all know that the splitting up of the year into a calendar is mildly arbitrary. Most events don't occur in a yearly cycle; they occur in a continuous sort of linear progression. Right? Things happen. There's nothing magical about now as about 3 days ago. So 2016 for me just happens to capture kind of a pretty big expansion of my reach and of how much meaningful and good work that I've done. So when a couple of people have asked me, what are your plans for 2017? My own plans are the same all the time, is to try to deliver very high quality information and high quality products that distill that information to as many people as would like to have them. And that's it. And I think it was very successful in 2016 and hopefully successful in 2017, but I'm not particularly attached to success because it's out of my hands. The only thing I can do is as good of a job as I can, and I'm definitely committed to doing that. So that's about it. All I can say about that.
Yeah, yeah. And do you already see what kind of themes do you plan to explore with your team? Because, for example, understanding healthy eating was, for example, a relatively new area of exploration as far as your products go. Is that correct?
Yeah, you bet. We've got some stuff in the works that's pretty top secret and I can't talk about.
Hmm.
But so that's going to be really cool. But there's also some stuff I'm going to be exploring hypertrophy training and practical recommendations for hypertrophy training considerably in the next couple of months. We're going to be I have the capacity to write a book on a very simple book, just like understanding healthy eating. I potentially could write one on physical activity in general, so something like physical activity and health.
Hmm.
I teach a course in which I cover both of those, and part of that course is basically teaching the exact same stuff that's in the Understanding Healthy Eating book. The second part of that course is in teaching about physical activity. So when people say, what is it about physical activity that leads to health? what kind of physical activity do I need to do? Because you've got very conflicting claims. People say, well, I do yoga. Is that good enough? Or some people say you got to lift weights. Or some people say, well, I just run. Is that okay? Or what about just gardening or walking around the city? Is that okay? There's actually the research on that is pretty crystal clear as to what has big effects, what has small effects, what has no effects at all, and what details matter. And I'm in a very good position to write that book. I just have to have the free time to do it. So that it could be something that we do this year. And there's going to be a lot of focus on hypertrophy training this year because I've gone out to that for a while now, and there's a lot of meaningful stuff to say about it. Totally.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, and I think especially from you, because you post a lot of stuff on Facebook and on various platforms on the themes of hypertrophy, and I think you're definitely one of the figures that if you put out something on that topic, then it will spark a lot of interest. So, yeah.
Well, hopefully, but yeah, thanks. And yeah, I try to do put out some really good stuff. And it's interesting. One thing we keep putting in, I've been writing a couple articles that are going to be coming out soon, and a couple of kind of little mini guidebooks about hypertrophy. And one thing that we actually say in all the articles in the mini guides is a lot of this is really food for thought, and it's designed to be applied as an idea. It's not dogmatic. One thing that I've been fighting for a while now is every time I make recommendations, if I make enough of them and I make them pretty clearly, some individuals seem to take them as very dogmatic and kind of almost religious. Exactly this, or they'll watch me do a workout. They'll say, "I noticed you do this. You seem to do it all the time. Why do you do it all the time?" And I go, how did you get the idea that I do it all the time? And they're like, well, you posted 3 videos. I'm like, do you think I only have 3 training sessions under my belt? And they say, oh, yeah, I had no idea. So a lot of the things we say, I'm kind of meaningfully trying to say now is, this is one approach that I think very much works. And I think it's intellectually very defensible. But it could be off by a little bit. I think it's always a good idea, no matter who the expert is or whoever says some stuff. Everything is always just really good food for thought, so that you can make your own plans and own training ideas from that. Because recently, as my popularity has grown, some people have started to say things about my ideas, kind of interpret them as dogmatic, and they're never meant to be like that. Always meant to be educated guesses of increasingly more precision, but not total precision.
Right. And so this actually is a good segue into what I want to talk about today is your book on healthy eating. And I think especially on that topic, obviously there is always a lot of snake oil salesmen out there, and it's always easy to promote false ideas and kind of BS and just wrong information. But especially when we talk about health, because, for example, with hypertrophy or with eating for body composition, if someone promotes some idea that is very obviously wrong, it will get tested out pretty quickly. Because if I tell you that calories don't matter, and if you believe that, within a week, you will see the implications of that. But with health, it's a bit more tricky because the outcomes are not manifesting themselves within a week. So would you agree that it's especially easy to muddy the water with that kind of, in this kind of theme?
Absolutely. And the evidence of that ease of muddiness is quite clear when you see that there are entire monoliths of industry built exclusively around falsehood. And there's no better way of saying that, or no easier, more gentle way of saying that. But there's entire people, entire organizations, entire magazines, entire stores built around almost total falsehoods. Dr. Oz, for example, comes to mind. I'm sure you know who that is. But, if you don't, that's great. But if you do, it's unfortunately almost everyone does.
Yeah.
He built a whole career on saying almost exclusively untrue things. There are a variety of health food stores that essentially are built on a fallacy, and a formal logical fallacy, the argument from nature, or the naturalistic fallacy, as it's otherwise known in some circles. And boy, oh boy, if you can sell $40 billion a year of product based on a lie, we can very confidently say there's something very, very wrong with the health industry. And yes, it's absolutely very easy to sell trickery, and we're trying to fight that as best as we can.
Yeah, and what do you generally say? Because I'm sure you hear this a lot of times that, well, one day science says this and the other day it says this, and experts contradict each other all the time. So what do you generally tell people who are not experts and are not kind of fitness professional? They're not necessarily even interested too much in health and fitness. What do you tell them? How can they navigate between all the information, and who can they trust? Is there a way to know this?
Yeah, there is, but it's really boring, and very few people do it. So you can tell them that the best place to start learning about diet and health, if you're very serious about knowing about it, is from textbooks that are used in high school and university courses. And these textbooks are kind of an agglomeration of most of the systematic literature reviews and meta-analyses that actually find what is up with health and what the relationship with diet and health is. But these books, my God, the truth is often not very entertaining, rather straightforward and sometimes technical. And so these books aren't really bestsellers. Most people have never heard of them, and there's some numbers involved, and there's some display involved, and it's very conducive to mass prescription. There's no easy shortcuts. There's no, just eliminate this one food and you're going to be healthy. But if you start with those kinds of books, of which Understanding Healthy Eating, the book we wrote, is an example of that. It's a very systematic, textbook-like book. Then you're off on the right path. But very few people do that. As far as trusting experts, you can look at the experts that have written those sorts of textbooks, people involved in official governing bodies on nutrition, and they're usually not very high-profile, prolific people that say a whole lot. And sometimes they'll write editorials in response to people who are prolific and high-profile that say the wrong stuff. But you don't really hear much about these people because they don't have anything super exciting to say. And in that sense, understanding how to eat well does require a little bit of effort to be put on an individual. And if they're like, well, what, can't they just like go online and type in a web link? They can give you particular websites that are written by those individuals and do aggregate very good representational literature, but they're not like the first thing that comes up on Google. And that's one of those things that when you have mass fallacies that abound, finding the truth can be difficult if you're using search engines. So for example, if you type in artificial sweeteners and health or aspartame and health, probably I think link number one is from something called the Mercola Foundation. Dr. Mercola runs it, right? And it's a foundation designed to peddle, for lack of a better term, bullshit herbal supplements that do dick. And it's a scam. The whole thing's a fucking scam. And it has so many page views because so many people come stock built with the naturalistic fallacy that they believe this stuff right away, and they'll automatically go to this page enough so that it gets huge page ranks, and all of a sudden it comes up first. So maybe third or fourth it comes up some Wikipedia article which actually gives you a good systematic review and says, hey, well, actually aspartame is completely fine for health. It's one of the safest food additives of all time. And but most people won't go to that, and they'll go to the first link, and it's a really big problem. So in situations like this, diet and health, when there's so much systematic mass illusion about health, and we have a whole chapter in the diet and health book about systematic fallacies that occur that are very popular. When there's so many popular fallacies, it's actually quite difficult to find the truth. For intelligent people that understand the scientific method, it's not that hard, because what you can do is say, who is putting out information that seems to be research driven, comprehensive research driven. So we're not data mining for articles that support our position. They're based on systematic reviews of the literature. That means they look at all of the studies on a particular topic and then let the literature speak about what's going on. People that are very dedicated to the scientific process. If you follow people like that on social media, they can link you up with the kind of literature reviews, easier if they find them than if you look for them. They can be very instructive. Two people that come to mind in that, and they don't often dabble in health, but they do considerably, is Brad Schoenfeld and Alan Aragon, for example. These individuals are very high social media reach. They're easy to find. The way they talk is different than a lot of the way people talk. They say, current understanding seems to indicate that. They don't say, this is the truth. You're dumb if you don't believe it. They're not. You see almost no conspiracy theories on their pages, and you see a very guarded, tentative scientific approach. So I think, if you follow people that seem to be very guarded, tentative, and scientific, and and couch their ideas, and this is good food for thought, this is probably our best idea what happens now, but further research can of course make this more precise and maybe change our direction. You're probably speaking to someone that has a respect for the truth and for good proper science, and you're probably going to get a lot of the same stuff from them as you will from other people like that inclination. If you like bombastic claims, things that turn the conventional wisdom on its head, or really counterintuitive sounding things that just feel right, and or simple approaches that just solve a whole lot of problems, eliminating one food or something like that, then you're probably looking at a lot of people who don't specialize in the truth and specialize in dogma instead. So even the way people carry themselves on social media, who to follow, just from tone, you can start to get a pretty good level of information as to who's the right kind of person to listen to, who may not be the right kind of person to listen to.
Yeah, and just to kind of one final point that I want to make on this is that I think it's especially hard for people to navigate between all these sources of information when someone, for example, we look at a dieting template like carb backloading. And one of, I mean, I used to be a pretty huge zealot back in the day, so unfortunately I know all these stuff by heart. And one of the big premises in that diet was that if you eat carbs in the morning, that's really bad because cortisol levels are highest in the morning, and insulin and cortisol high at the same time do these horrible things in the body, and your body makes new empty fat cells and all that kind of stuff. And then there is a reference, but that reference is some incredibly complex biochemical pathway, and the average person will never ever have the means to know or to decide whether that information is correct, and they will just say, wow, that sounds really complex, and they will believe it. And that's really sad, but it's very hard to defend for the average person, right?
Yeah, very. And that brings up another point. And the man that wrote that book and that propagated that, what was his name? John Kiefer. He's a fucking charlatan. There's no other way to put that that I can think of. And he legitimately misrepresented claims on purpose to try to put some kind of worldview together, and to probably to try to make money, I assume. He's actually is just charlatanism is what he's involved in. Unfortunately, I can't cut him any more slack than that. And he's actively intentionally using scientific language and scientific terminology in ways that don't make any sense and are not good faith efforts at kind of arriving to the truth. So there are a lot of people like him in the industry that will scientize their work. I actually had an article back in the day about that. Kind of the scientization of the fitness industry is when they'll use little formulas and equations and references that to very educated people make no damn sense, but to most other people make as much sense as anything else science puts out. So that's another problem, is there are people in the diet and health industry actively trying to fool you so that you buy their shit. And that's really, really bad news. And I wish I had nicer things to say, but that is the reality of the matter, and it's a really, really big problem. So that's another big hurdle, and another reason why so many people get caught up in stuff is because not everyone saying stuff is coming at it from, because you could have the problem of people honestly trying to figure something out, but some of them have made errors. In diet and health, there's another part of the problem where people are not honestly trying to figure something out. They're just trying to sell you a way of doing things so they can make money. And there's nothing wrong with making money. It's great. But, if you're kind of one of those people that buys that stuff, boy, you're going to pay for it. And you're being actually, purposefully deluded by people trying to sell you stuff. And the carb backloading was one of those things.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I mean, at some point, I guess it unfortunately for a lot of people, what it comes down to is that they almost have to be lucky enough that they come across the good sources of information, like Alan Aragon, like Brett Schoenfeld. And it's a sad reality, but that's just how it is.
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, the language of how these individuals carry themselves can be instructive. If you've ever seen any of that guy's stuff, his advertisements are always really bombastic, and are you tired of not growing any muscle? Yeah, you can have revolutionary results with most exercise scientists are wrong, and all this really crazy sounding shit, and it was really spammy, right? That always made me uncomfortable. And as a matter of fact, at Renessance, we've produced some free materials as part of like, an email funnel to try to get to reach more people. And we have this free document that just came out recently. It's actually out now. It's an MRV funnel. It's like a little mini ebook, mini article that I wrote. And the individual that was helping us write it is used to web marketing, and we had to tone down. He was a great guy. We had to tone down everything he said because it was so spammy. and that's what gets the clicks. And we're like, we're okay with getting fewer clicks. We're never going to come off like this, I remember his first attempt at the article. It was called, the new science. He called it the new science of maximum recoverable volume. And I was like, it's neither new nor is it a science. so we just ended up with the MRV concept as described by Dr. Israetel. That doesn't sound that cool. I want fucking new science, damn it. I want robots and shit. I want like petri dishes to fly out of the fucking computer when I click on it. But that's just not true. So we couldn't say that kind of stuff. So I think another really cool tip for people listening to this is if someone's stuff sounds really, really spammy and like new total revolution, like I wouldn't I would be very, very skeptical of that kind of stuff. If someone's stuff is like, hey, here's a review of the literature on stuff that works, or here's this idea, maybe it's worth looking into a little bit more.
Yeah, man, this topic is so endless. So yeah, let's just get into our beautiful topic today. So when we talk about eating for health as opposed to body composition or for performance, obviously there is some overlap, but what is the biggest difference between eating for health or for body composition?
The amount of macronutrient doesn't matter as much for health. It matters more for composition. But the source of foods, what we call the food composition, where the foods come from, where you get your protein, where you get your carbs, where you get your fats, the particular kinds of foods don't matter much for composition, but they matter much more for body composition, but they matter much more for health. So for example, I'll give you two ways in which this works. For health, as long as you get a very bare minimum of proteins, of carbs, and of fats, you can have a very one-sided diet of mostly carbs, mostly proteins, mostly fats, or an incredibly varied diet with, of 1/3 of everything. And anything in between, as long as you hit those minima, and you do all the other stuff correctly, you're off to a very, very good health. So when someone says something like, eating a lot of protein is really important to health, that's actually not true. It's not true if you say eating a lot of fat, or if you say eating a lot of carbs, or minimizing any of those is also false. Diversity in macronutrient profiles that result in good health, so long as you're doing all the other stuff correctly. Now, on the other hand, in body composition, those nutrients, getting enough of those macronutrients minima is very important. So when you say, I want to optimize body composition, but I don't like to eat a whole lot of protein, you're going to run into a very serious problem. If you say, I want to get really muscular, but I want to keep my carbohydrate levels low, you're going to run into a very serious problem. So the macronutrient amounts much more important to composition, whereas they're not very important to diet and health. On the other hand, for composition of the actual food, where those macros come from, if you want to be as healthy as you can be, but you like to eat mostly Pop-Tarts, Cheerios, and whey protein powder, the IFYM ultimate, right? Kind of a little running joke. You're going to be trading off a significant amount of health for that. The kinds of foods you eat do matter for health, and they do matter quite a bit. On the other hand, if you want pure body composition outcomes, and someone's like, you really have to eat more fruits and vegetables, you should stop eating all these Pop-Tarts, as long as you got your macros right, your calories right, your timing is right, you can eat like pretty weird, not super healthy sources of macronutrients. Tons of sugar, tons of saturated fat, maybe proteins that are, powdered proteins, not even the most high quality stuff. And you will actually accomplish quite a bit of body composition results. And you can get ripped eating mostly junk food just in the right proportions. Can you get healthy? Yes. But would you be much more healthy if you focused on the minutia of the kinds of foods? Absolutely. And on the flip side of that, if you really want to enhance your body composition and you don't pay much attention to how many grams of protein, et cetera, you're eating, but you pay a lot of attention to the quality of the food. You say, okay, my only carbohydrates are going to be fruits, veggies, whole grains, spirulina meats, and only healthy fats. If you don't get your proteins and carbs and fats right, you're missing out on a lot of results as far as appearance, even though you're going to be very healthy. So the kinds of foods you eat, very important to health, not super important to body composition. The amounts of macronutrients, pretty important to body composition, not nearly as important to health as long as you get the minimum.
Right. So I really liked in the previous book, which was about nutrition for body composition, that you laid out a pyramid or hierarchy of importance of the different factors. So you already touched on this, but how does this hierarchy of importance differ for eating for health?
Yeah. So for eating for body composition, the first priority is calories, and the second priority is the amount of proteins, carbs, or fats that make up those calories. The third priority is nutrient timing, which actually has a pretty big role, 10%, not insignificant. And then only later, kind of tied with supplements and dead last, is food composition, which is like exactly what are you actually eating. In diet and health, calories are still number one, which is great, and it's a really, really good commonality. And actually, calories are even more important to diet and health than they are to body composition. Secondly, you get very important is food composition. So what those calories are made of. So to put it this way, if you only had 2 tips to give someone, you were sitting on an airplane or something and the flight was almost over and they found out you knew your stuff about diet and health, they're like, what are the easy tips for diet and health? You could say, listen, control your calories so that you're at a healthy weight and eat mostly healthy foods when you do eat food. And that's it. So your food composition comes in second. And between calories and food composition, that's probably 80% of all the variance in diet and health. After that, and so it's flip-flopped, then we have actual macronutrient amounts as third, right? And then we have timing as like way, way down the list. It does almost nothing for health. And that's an interesting thing we can get into if you have any questions about nutrient timing and health, because a lot of people think it's a really big deal, and it's really just not. It's much more of a big deal for composition, for body composition, than it is for health. And then later, we have supplements, hydration, all that stuff that barely matters at all. But the kind of food, so the big difference is, macronutrients don't matter very much for health, but they matter a lot for body composition. And food composition, the actual foods you're eating, matter plenty for health, but very, very little for body composition.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about level 1 first. So calories and body weight, obviously they're intimately tied. And so you're saying that both are important. So how much you're eating and then what kind of body composition that yields to, right?
The question of body composition is actually a little bit more complicated, so we can speak to that in just a second. What I can say is how much food you're eating in relation to your physical activity is the only determinant of your body weight.
Mm-hmm.
And so this calorie intake, or what's called calorie balance, is actually it's not defined as how many calories you're eating, it's how many calories you're eating relative to your physical activity. Right? So, and that really just determines your body weight. So that variable could actually be called body weight. I mean, pretty much the same thing. Body weight is so intricately tied to health, it is difficult to overstate. Body weight is the best single proxy of health you can ever make without going directly to blood work. The next thing after that is just blood work. You got to do invasive stuff. But how much someone weighs, especially in relation to their height, how big they are, is profoundly linked to health. And despite the many efforts of people in the fitness industry to say otherwise, people say, BMI, right, which is BMI is a kind of a statistical measurement of largeness. It's the, how heavy you are based on your height. People will say, BMI doesn't matter. They're wrong. There's no other way to put that. For the general population, how much you weigh relates to how fat you are incredibly, incredibly closely. Not very few people walk around super jacked. So for most people, how heavy you are and how fat you are mean almost the same thing. Now, for individuals that have a lot of muscle and very little fat that are much heavier than you would think, being heavier still costs you. It still costs you in health. Now, if that extra weight is muscle, that costs you much less than if it's fat. But it still costs you. So any individual that is big and lean and muscular, if all of a sudden health was number one to them, they should lose weight, period. But because they have very little body fat, they can be as healthy as a person who weighs less but just has more body fat than them. However, at any point, weighing less, if you're overweight, is better. It's just much better for people that are over fat than it is for people that are muscular. So take this example. If someone is, maybe meter and a half tall or something, meter 65, something like that, and they weigh about, I don't know, 70 kilos, or they weigh, let's say, 85 kilos, but they're jacked, they're lean. Simple question we could produce from a scientific standpoint is, would they be healthier at 70 kilos? And the answer is almost always yes. Now, would they be healthier at 60? At 60, they maybe actually be underweight, and then they could get healthier by gaining weight. But down to about maybe 65 kilos at that height, you would be healthier the closer you were to 65K. And if you were 90K, let's say you were 110K, you were an IFBB pro bodybuilder, you had 3% body fat, you would still be healthier if you weighed less than 110K. When 105 would be better than 110, 100 would be better, all the way down to 65. And because you're lean, that's great. But that still doesn't save you. And it's not a getaway, it's not a get out of jail free card. Being lean is awesome in its own right, but weight itself is negatively affecting health if you're overweight. It's just much less so if it's mostly muscle than if it's fat, but it's still an effect. One of the ultimate examples of that is people who are super muscular, world's strongest man competitors, IFBB pro bodybuilders. They're super jacked, super big. Their mortality rate, their rate of illness is actually quite high. It's not something magical that you would be like, oh, they're super lean and super active, they should be living forever. They have mortality rates sometimes comparable to individuals that are of that same body weight and relatively active, but pretty fat. They're not worlds away like you would expect if you think body fat was really, really what's wrong, and muscle was just kind of a free thing you could gain without any ill health effects. So body weight is incredibly important. And for most people reading our book, they're not super jacked, and a lot of times to get that jacked, so if you read our book and you weigh 250 pounds, can you really look yourself in the mirror and say, oh, it's all muscle though? Like, I mean, my God, if you're 250 all muscle, you're probably using pharmaceuticals to get there, which are already bad for your health. So, you're probably carrying some excess body fat and body weight, and you probably would be healthier if you were lighter. Can't state it either way. Body weight is really, really important to how healthy you are, and the lighter you are to a point, and at that point is being pretty light, the healthier you are over the long term. Now, I have to say something really quickly. It is a metric, but it's also a value judgment. How healthy you are on average and how long you can live are trade-offs to other activities you may find to be more amusing and more better uses of your time. For example, I could easily, if I wanted, I could weigh half of what I do. I currently weigh like 240 pounds. I could, easily weigh one half of that and be very, very healthy and live maybe till I was 90 or something. Like my whole family is all like tiny little hobbit-looking Jewish people that live till they're 100. So I could easily do that. But then I would miss out on the part of my life that lets me get a pump in the gym, pull off my shirt to get a tank top, look in the mirror, and look like a god or something. Oh my God, I can't believe this is real. That brings me such an incredible amount of joy. I'm willing to trade off some number of years of my life. It's a trade-off, though. I understand that it is. There's no free lunch there. But just because you're less healthy being super jacked and super lean, at some crazy body weight, doesn't mean that everyone should try to make health their number one priority. I mean, for Christ's sake, life enjoyment should be a priority. And to be honest, you could ask the question of how much fast food or pizza or ice cream should you eat if health is your number one and only priority? The answer is never eat any of that stuff. But who the hell wants to do that? I mean, why the hell are you alive? Just to be alive? Like, yeah, I made it to 95, and you're on your deathbed at 95. And they're like, so how was life? Like, it sucked. I lived it like a machine that was just trying to live as long as I could. And by living as long as I could, I made my life so sterile that I hated every moment of it. Well, that sucks, right? The only thing we want to do is make these trade-offs kind of available. Yeah, it's certainly fine to say I could live to 95 if I did everything perfectly, but I'm going to live to 85 and have a whole lot of fun, just measured fun. But nobody wants to say, okay, I'm just going to say fuck all of this and get up to 450 pounds and die at age 40. I mean, I don't think a lot of people want to die at age 40, right? So there's definitely some trade-offs to make. And by knowing diet and health principles, you can make intelligent trade-offs. So when we write this book, we're not saying everyone needs to be 120 pounds. If you want to live as long as possible, yeah, you should probably weigh very, very little, like a Buddhist monk or something like that. But if you understand that, okay, at 240 pounds, you're going to have some of these negative health effects, but at 200 pounds, you're still going to be pretty jacked, pretty lean, and have much fewer. Maybe it's your choice to stay closer to 200, or your choice to make the trade-off and go to 240. So it's all about using that information to your best abilities with your own moral judgments about what you want to do with your life.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you said, you might have a really healthy corpse when you die, but when you look back at your life, it sucked. Then it's not a very good trade-off. But just still dissecting this a little bit, when we look at just simply being heavy, not necessarily over fat, but just heavy, why is it so bad for your body? Is it because of the extra burden on your heart and organs and the extra blood you have to pump, or what is it so bad about it?
Absolutely, that's one of the main reasons. So, I mean, your heart has to actually actively work to pump blood to everything. Your heart probably has only so many beats in it per lifetime. And if it uses more of those beats to pump blood around your big ass, then if you were smaller, you'd live longer. Your total amount of metabolic stress is higher. The amount of mitochondria that produce free radicals is higher when you're bigger. It's just more stuff, more engine to burn. And the lifespan is thus longer because you accumulate metabolic stress faster. All of your organs are required to work harder. Kidneys being a very obvious one, actually, if filter more blood. You got blood pressure considerations when you're heavier. Now, a lot of the stuff can be mitigated with proper medication and making sure to be very healthy and active, but nothing beats being lighter as far as that's concerned. So just being big is laborious. And in every single instance of every single interspecies comparison, live less long time than smaller. Intraspecies, not interspecies. So for example, within dogs, right? We have dogs that are very small, and they're the same species that are dogs that are very big. Very big dogs don't live very long. You get a Great Dane, you got to go to 5-6 years with a Great Dane. That boy's going to die on you quick. You get a Chihuahua, that thing's going to outlive you or something like that, right? It lives like 20 years, something unreasonable. It's like blind and can't see, but it's still alive. It's like 22 years old, so something insane. Great Dane is not going to live till 22 because the dog physiology was not designed, literally not designed to support an animal that size. Human physiology was absolutely not designed to support humans that are gigantic, so humans that are gigantic burn through that physiology faster, right? Now, if you're an elephant, your elephant physiology is actually designed to support really, really huge animal. Elephants live, I think, 40 or 50 years or something like that, which is pretty good. And they live that long because their physiology is designed to support that weight. But for humans, we're not meant to be elephant weight. And some of us that get up to that kind of weight, 600, 700, 800 pounds or whatever, pay for it really, really fast. So within considering almost every species within a species, there's an optimal weight range for longevity, and much lower and much higher than that is just going to cost your organs one way or another. And if that's muscle, it's good because fat does some particular things to your physiology that are not great. And also inactivity both causes high levels of body fat and it takes a toll on your physiology in other ways. So that's a much bigger problem. But even if it's muscle, it's still a problem. Now, is it much smaller of a problem? Totally. Like, so for example, I weigh, 110 kilos or about 240 pounds, and my blood work, to be completely honest, is amazing. This is great, right? Could it be better if I was smaller? No, totally. But it was pretty good. Would I have the same blood work if I was inactive and fat? Oh my God, not even close. But it still could be better if I was smaller. So it's one of those situations where, yeah, just pure body size, because primarily of organ stress, will cost you. And here's another interesting thing about body size, which we could say. You could be very healthy at a high body weight when you're younger. When you're older, a lot of the stress that body weight put on your joints and limbs starts to accumulate to the point where your ability to be physically active later in life is very hampered. You can be very healthy at age 40 at 110 kilos. At age 60, having walked around at 110 kilos for that long, your knees might be totally shot. I mean, they're just done. You don't have knees anymore as far as you're concerned. Now you're a candidate for knee replacement surgery, hip replacement surgery, etc. Because of burdening yourself with that heavy weight your whole life, you are at poorer health now. your mobility is going to be restricted. And now the very physical activity that adds so much to your longevity and your health is something you can't do as much of as you need to. But if you spend your whole life weighing 60 kilos, man, you're going to be 80 and your bones are going to be fresh as ever. So there's not much of a burden on them at all. Exercise was a burden that made them stronger, but there wasn't that chronic burden of moving around and being heavy. And if you've ever been really heavy, you know exactly how that actually feels. It feels like shit, and you know you're taking a toll on your joints.
Yeah, and when we talk about, being over, like having excess fat tissue, do you think there is a way to kind of be in that state but still be healthy? And I'll specify what I mean, because there is a particular health professional individual who's pretty public actually, and he is, I mean, overweight to say the least, but probably is more obese if I'm being honest. And he's always saying that he doesn't care about fat loss and about body composition. What he cares about is that his blood work is incredible and he's super healthy. In your professional opinion, is this even possible to achieve?
Yeah, absolutely is. The problem is there's a time delay that's not being figured out into that. You can be currently obese, and the high level of adiposity is causing very slow, sequential, unstoppable changes to your physiology that will eventually reflect themselves in poor blood work. But for literally years, you can be fat and look really healthy. And you are really healthy, but the fat is slowly taxing away your health. So that the really, really big question, right? The super big question isn't necessarily, okay, am I healthy now? Which is a good question. The question is, am I healthy now, and am I setting myself up to be healthy later? If you are lean and you're healthy now, you're not destroying your health later. There's nothing systemically going on that's going to be worrisome for you. If you are overweight now, you're very healthy now, you could be, but you won't be healthy later, because the very fact that you're carrying a high level of adiposity is at a metabolic level setting up poor health later. That's been demonstrated very clearly already, incredibly clearly. So people who are overweight now and saying it's okay, my blood work is good, they're living on borrowed time in some sense. I can put this to you, not an analogy, but actually a literal example. How many overweight teenagers are there? A lot. How many of them have poor blood work? Most of them don't. Most of them have good blood work. They really do. Why? Because they're fucking young, man. They're fucking kids. Kids can eat fucking pizza and ice cream every meal of the day, and they look fine and they feel great. Even if they're over fat, that doesn't reflect in their blood work, because they need time for those fat cells to destroy their metabolisms and make them unhealthy. And once that happens, holy shit, here's a really big problem with that. High accumulation of body fat, just as an example, builds insulin resistance over long periods of time. For a long time, it's undetectable. Then you get pre-diabetic and you start to kind of be concerned. And then if you keep doing that stuff, you're diabetic, type 2 diabetic. After you become type 2 diabetic, you don't just reverse it. You're something you're burdened with for the rest of your life. It's more or less a permanent condition. Now, if you lose all of that body fat, become super, super lean, you can, from a blood work perspective, look no longer type 2 diabetic, but as soon as you gain the smallest level of body fat back, you go right back into a very, very deleterious state where someone else could have gained body fat back. And if they never were type 2 diabetic, it's not really a big problem for them. You get heavier, lighter, no big deal. But once you're type 2 diabetic, you got to watch that shit super carefully, because if you don't, you're paying for it right away. So that's a problem, right? So when people who are, what is it called, fit but fat, I think most people in the industry, or most experts in obesity, would say, good that you're not currently unhealthy, but now is the time to lose a lot of fat so that you can set up health for later, because otherwise you're just living on borrowed time, more or less.
Right. Okay. So I think we really exhausted this topic. And just to put a final point on this, if we look at kind of the ideal body composition for health, would it be something akin to like a fitness model type of look? Maybe not as lean necessarily, but something like that, which is a little bit more muscular than the average person, but not crazy huge muscular, and definitely is much leaner than the average person.
Muscularity, probably average muscularity is just fine. A little bit above average seems to confer a slightly good health advantage, especially as you get older. So, let me put it to you in layman's terms. You know that guy at the office or at work, or that kid at school that's like really skinny, and you're like, Jesus, how do you stand up and down? That's not enough muscularity to be optimally healthy. But as long as someone looks like a normal, healthy young person, they probably have enough muscle to be as healthy as they'll ever be. Any additional muscle doesn't make you unhealthy. It just makes you be able to do cool shit like fight crime or whatever else we use our muscle for, take over the world. But on that note, so the muscle thing is really small, kind of room for movement there. The minimum isn't that much at all. For body fat, down to about 15% fat for women, and down to a figure that is as yet unclear in men, the leaner the better. Period. But that doesn't mean we have to go insane and try to be as lean as possible all the time and ruin our lives. For men, if you're fit and healthy and active, anything under 20% is really not much to worry about from a long-term health perspective, especially for adults. Anything under 15% is great. Under 10%, you're just killing it. So if you shoot for about 15%, if you're around 15 somewhere, anything below that is just bonus points. So you're good to go. For females, 25% body fat is like awesome. Anything below 25, between 15 and 25 is just rock star shit. So 25% or so. So if you're a female at 30, you're not doing too bad. If you're at 35, you could lose some fat and be healthier. If you're at 25, if someone really comes up to you when you're 25% fat as a female and says, you know what, you need to lose a ton of fat because otherwise you're going to be way healthier. That's just false. You're just going to be a little bit healthier if you go from 25 to 20, from 20 to 15. Below 15, you actually start to have reproductive negative health effects for females, and it's not really actually recommended. But 25% for females, 50% for males, those are rough targets for the general population that if you're around them within like 5% or so, physical activity is what you should be worried about next. And then if you want a certain look, you have to understand that look is largely independent from health. So for example, if I walk into an office of people and everyone looks like about normal body size, nobody looks like super over fat, when most people are under 25% body fat, and you're going to say, okay, like, what can you tell these people, as far as what they should look like physique wise? I'm just like, they look fine. Say from the health perspective, they look great. But then you say, okay, what about just from a physique perspective? Like, then we can make like critiques about muscle shape and symmetry and all this other crap. But that doesn't have as much to do with health. It's just being of a normal body size and not super over fat, under 25% fat.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you for that clarification. And then food composition. Why is it important in a general sense to eat lots of whole foods and not that much processed foods? All right, guys, this was part 1 of this interview with Dr. Mike Israetel. Like I said, this guy is just brilliant. And to hear part 2, where we will be addressing the rest of the important concepts related to healthy eating, stay super tuned and definitely subscribe because it will come very soon. So speak soon and take care until then. All right, see ya.